What's up, everyone? This is Bobby Douglas, and today we will be walking through my 2023 NCAA Tournament bracket predictions. We'll be going through every single game from the first round all the way up to the national championship. It's currently around 1 in the morning Central Time, and we just got done watching the first four games where Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Pitt won. Two pretty good games, too. But yeah, 1 in the morning, and so you could tell by how my hair looks and everything, like, I've been going pretty nuts, you know? I've had multiple brackets filled out. You can actually see all of them right here. I've made probably like 15 different ones before my final one. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously, last year was one to forget. I had Gonzaga winning it all. 2 years ago, though, I had Baylor winning it all, and so that was good. So we're looking to get back on that rhythm this year. So without further ado, here are my official picks for the 2023 NCAA Tournament. Let's go. Okay, starting with the South region, our first game is Alabama, Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. I will take Alabama in that one. Maryland, West Virginia is the 8-9 here. I'll take Maryland. I think the athletic wing duo of Dante Scott and Hakeem Hart will kind of disorient West Virginia. West Virginia is obviously a very tough team, but they are more offensively based rather than defensively, which is weird to think about when it's West Virginia. But that's kind of the thing you have to remember here. West Virginia is not those press Virginia type teams this year. I like Eric Stevenson. I think he's a good player, but Maryland I just think has a little bit more firepower, so I'll take them. San Diego State, Charleston. A lot of people like Charleston in this one. I really don't see it with them. I'll take San Diego State. Charleston I just don't think has the athletes to really hang with San Diego State. San Diego State is going to dictate this tempo. They're going to make it a half-court game, and if you can't really score in transition if you're Charleston, I don't know where you get points. So I'll take the Aztecs. Virginia, Furman. I'll take Virginia here. A lot of people like Furman, including myself. I was kind of disappointed when I saw this one because Furman, I think, is a really good team. I really like Jalen Slauson and Mike Bothwell, but when you look at Virginia, they have guys like Reese Beekman, who I think defensively can really bother Bothwell, and then Jaden Gardner. And they're big guys with people like Caden Shedrick. I think they're enough to slow down Slauson, even though I really like him as a player and honestly his NBA prospect. But I think Virginia gets by here. Creighton, NC State. NC State's got two really good guards that can go for 30 on any given night. That being said, I like Creighton here. I'll take them to beat the Wolfpack. Baylor, UCSB. UCSB has some really high-end talent with AJ Mitchell and Miles Norris, who's a guy, I think he was like a top 100 recruit, started his career at Oregon. But I think Baylor has a little bit too much talent. I'll take them. Missouri, Utah State. This is a game that a lot of people have been going back and forth on. I personally will take Missouri here. I know their defense is bad, but honestly, a lot of that is due to the fact that they don't rebound well. And so Utah State's not really a team that's going to crash the glass. And so without that, I think Missouri is the type of team that switches defenses really well. They obviously play super fast, and honestly, they force a bunch of turnovers. That's the type of team in Utah State that can struggle against that. And so I'll take Missouri beating Utah State. And then Arizona, Princeton, I think Arizona wins. Princeton just doesn't have the size. Alabama, Maryland, I will take Alabama. I just think they're a wagon this year. Brandon Miller's awesome. Probably the best player in the country if you're looking at it from a non-player of the year discourse thing. Like, if you're a college basketball program and you want one player on your team for the tournament, I think the answer is Brandon Miller. San Diego State, Virginia. I like San Diego State a little bit better here. Again, Lamont Butler, Matt Bradley, I think are two studs. Virginia, obviously, without Ben Vanderplas, that hurts them here. These two teams obviously play very similarly in terms of they want to slow the game down, beat you on the defensive end, and I think San Diego State does that better than Virginia. Creighton versus Baylor. I'll take Creighton here over Baylor. I just think Baylor doesn't guard anybody, and their guards, for as good as they are, it's rare to see all three of them doing well at the same time. And I know Adam Flagler's been playing a lot of point this year. I still worry about them as a team that doesn't really have a true point guard. Creighton, meanwhile, I just think they have one of the best, most balanced starting fives in the country, and so I'll take the Blue Jays here. Missouri, Arizona. I'll take Missouri here, actually. Again, Arizona's the type of team that wants to play fast, but I honestly think they're better off not playing super fast and just kind of focusing on getting it to their big guys in Tubelis and Ballo. We saw in the Pac-12 championship game that Arizona got away from that, and it ultimately ended up almost costing them the Pac-12 championship. Missouri, meanwhile, is a team that will encourage Arizona to play super fast, and I know they're undersized a little bit, but I think the switching defenses and how good they are at forcing turnovers, I think they can bother the Arizona guards. And guys like Demoy Hodge, who's just an awesome two-way guard. Kobe Brown, obviously, is a great scorer. And I really like Nick Honor as kind of a stabilizer for that team as well. So I'll take Missouri over Arizona. In the Sweet 16, Alabama versus San Diego State. Alabama just has too many guys for San Diego State, honestly. Like, San Diego State could basically dominate the pace of this game for 30 minutes. All Alabama needs is like a 5 to 7 minute stretch of them hitting multiple threes and playing super fast up and down the floor to really put this game out of reach. And so that kind of worries me that Alabama is just so good at turning games around in an instant, where San Diego State, I'm not sure if they could really recover if they got down early. And so I will take Alabama. Creighton, Missouri. I will take Creighton here. I really like Creighton. I've liked them in the preseason. They were a Final Four team for me. Obviously, they've struggled with injuries and things like that and inconsistency. They lost 6 games in a row, had some bad losses in there. But again, Ryan Nembhard is the point guard. Trey Alexander is that off-ball scoring type guy. Baylor Shireman, who is just a flamethrower from deep, really good passer. Arthur Kaluma, defensively oriented, athletic wing. And then Ryan Kalkbrenner, one of the best shot blockers in the country. That's a really good starting 5. I think that's enough to beat Missouri here. And then in the Elite 8, we have Alabama against Creighton. This is where I take Alabama, and this really comes down to depth for me. Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised to see him go 11 deep in this tournament, which is insane to have that many assets at your disposal. Creighton, meanwhile, once you get past that starting 5, the roster really thins out, and that's what would concern me in a game against Alabama. So I'll take Alabama to the Final Four here. Okay, so now let's go to the Midwest. Houston, Northern Kentucky. Northern Kentucky plays a lot of zone, and that could actually kind of bother Houston. I could see this game being like 23-16 at half before Houston just kind of erases everything. So I'll take Houston here. Iowa, Auburn. This game is stupid because it's in Birmingham, Alabama, which, if you're Auburn and a 9 seed, how do you get that, right? That is the most ridiculous thing I've seen. I don't know how the committee kind of allows that to happen. I mean, granted, on an actual neutral site, I'd take Auburn anyway. I just think their defense is way better. I think Janai Broom dominates the paint against Iowa. Iowa's been super inconsistent all year. They don't guard anybody. But just, come on, NCAA, do better than that. I'll take Auburn. Miami, Drake. A lot of people like Drake in this one. They might even be favored by the time it tips off just because we don't know the health of Miami's Norchad Omier, who's really like their only big guy, even though he's like 6'7", 6'8". Even with his health in question, though, I still like Miami. I really think they have the shot making to really just withstand a big man injury. I really like Isaiah Wong. He's one of the most underrated players nationally. Nigel Pack has awesome range. I love Wooga Poplar. Jordan Miller's a stud. Is kind of like a 6'6" swingman, off-ball guard type of guy. And Drake, I know they have Tucker DeVries. I know they're a super experienced team. You know, they got guys like Roman Penn, who's their point guard, and then Darnell Brody, who's a really good rebounder. But I just think Miami has a little bit too much talent, and I really like them all year. I'm not going to change that now. Indiana, Kent State. This is where I will have my first-round major upset. I'll take Kent State here. I love Indiana. I love Jalen Hood-Schifino and Trace Jackson-Davis. They're up there for one of the best pairs in college basketball. The problem is that outside of those two guys, I see a lot of standers. And if guys like Miller Kopp and Trey Galloway aren't hitting shots from the perimeter, then teams aren't punished for doubling Trace Jackson-Davis, right? And so I think that worries me in a game where Kent State will come at you defensively. They've played really close games against Gonzaga, Houston. I really like Kent State here, and so I'm taking the Golden Flashes to beat Indiana here, and what's my first major upset of the first round. Iowa State versus Pittsburgh. I take Iowa State here. I just think their defense translates to the tournament. They were an 11 seed last year, got to the Sweet 16. Obviously, they're, I think, probably a worse offensive team this year than they were last year, but ultimately, I trust TJ Otzelberger here. I really like Gabe Kalsher and Jaron Holmes as shot makers. And so I'll take Iowa State over Pitt. Xavier versus Kennesaw State. This one hurts me because I was really hoping for Liberty to get in because I thought that team was going to be really, really difficult to beat in the tournament. But credit to Kennesaw State. It's their first tournament ever. I think Xavier's a little bit too much for Kennesaw State. Even without Zach Freemantle, I'll take the Musketeers. A&M versus Penn State. And actually, I'm going to lump in Texas and Colgate here. I'll just take Texas to beat Colgate. But I just want to talk about this. This is the most effed up pod I have ever seen in my life. A&M's not a 7 seed. If you look on Ken Pom and Bart Torvik and you filter it to January 1st, A&M's one of the top 8 teams in the country, and they're a 7 seed. So I hate this because, one, not only are you screwing Texas A&M by giving them a 7 seed when they really deserve a 5 seed, maybe even a 4 seed, but you're also screwing Texas because Texas shouldn't have to play Texas A&M in the second round. Texas earned that 2 seed. They're Big 12 tournament champions. What are we doing here? A&M's not a 7 seed. They have to go against Penn State, who almost won the Big 10 tournament, and they've been playing really well recently too. So I hate this pod, but at the same time, it's probably the most competitive one. I'll take A&M to beat Penn State here. I really, really like Wade Taylor to fourth. I think he's the perfect March guard, someone who can score at all 3 levels. I think Tyrese Radford's a really good complement to him as well. And then you get guys like Julius Marble, you get Henry Coleman. I really like Solomon Washington as kind of like a defensive energizer. He's only a freshman, and I really like him. Penn State, like, I love that team too. I would probably have them winning a few games if they were in a different part of the bracket. But you run into A&M, and it's just an issue. So, unfortunately, I love Jalen Pickett, love Micah Shrewsbury. I hope he's the next coach at ND. Pray for that. But yeah, I like A&M here. And so that completes the first round for that region. Houston, Auburn, again, total bullshit that Auburn gets to play this in Birmingham. But still, I think Houston's just way too good. Marcus Sasser's injury does concern me a little bit. But at this point, I think they can beat Auburn with a 80% healthy Sasser, if that makes sense. Houston's just so good, and we've seen their style of play translate and totally disorient teams in the tournament. I like them. Miami versus Kent State. I take Miami here just because, again, the shot making of the guards for Miami. I made a video about it back in, I think, January or December. I'm going to stick with that for now. Even though a lot of people seem to be fading Miami right now, I'm not going to. I'll stick with the Hurricanes. Iowa State versus Xavier. This is the type of game that I think Iowa State can rough up enough to really give Xavier some problems. I love Sule Boom. He's one of my favorite players to watch in the country for Xavier. Really good, crafty point guard. Xavier's a good team. I just think Iowa State's a really bad matchup for them, and I will take the Cyclones. And then just the absolute game of death in the round of 32. You might as well make this an Elite 8 game, because if that were an option, I probably would have that. I'll take Texas to beat A&M, though. Texas's shot making in the backcourt, I think, has really impressed me this year with Marcus Carr, Tyrese Hunter, Serge Jabari Rice, one of the best shot fakes in basketball. A&M, I don't think has the level of guard play of Texas, and I think that's what gets them here. Even though, again, if you put Texas A&M in any other region, I think I'm taking them to the Sweet 16, which is tough, you know? But that's just the way the bracket unfolded. So I'll take Texas here. Houston versus Miami. This is where Houston's defense, I'm expecting a fully healthy Sasser at this point because this would be the second weekend. I think this team totally roughs up Miami when it comes to rebounding, when it comes to physicality, defense. I think they can really bother the shot makers of Miami, so I'll take Houston here. Iowa State versus Texas, Big 12 battle. These games always seem to go one of two ways. Either the favorite will just blow the underdog out of the water, so in this case it would be Texas just killing Iowa State, or the underdog wins because they've seen the other team so many times, right? So I could see this going either way, but I think I would lean on the side of Texas just beating the doors off of Iowa State, which would set up a Houston-Texas Elite 8 game. And I'm going to be honest with you, maybe I'm spoiling this a little bit, but this would be my national championship if it could be. I really like both of these two teams. It sucks that they're in the same region. I hate this region, and I hate the bracket makers because they totally screwed up this region. It's so hard. But ultimately, I'm taking Houston. They were my preseason pick. Really like their guards. Jamal Shedd, I think, is an awesome March guard. In addition to Sasser and Jawan Roberts is really good as a rebounder. Jarris Walker, obviously, going to be a top 10 pick. 6'8", big wing. So I'll take Houston here. I do worry about Houston's offensive lulls that they seem to have. But ultimately, with Houston, my main thing is that the one thing that they'll give up is open threes because they like to double the post or hard hedge out of ball screens, which leads to a lot of scramble situations. But with Texas, I'm not sure they have the three-point shooting to really capitalize off of that. And so I'll take Houston here to get to the Final Four. Okay, moving on to the West region. Once again, much like Texas and Texas A&M, Kansas got totally screwed here. You put them in the West region when they ultimately should be playing in Kansas City as number 2 overall seed based on their resume. Not only that, but you also put UCLA and Gonzaga in their region as the 2s and 3s. So if they all end up getting to Las Vegas, UCLA and Gonzaga will have more of a home court advantage. But whatever. Anyway, I'll have Kansas beating Howard here. Arkansas versus Illinois, two teams I really like as 8-9s. I think Arkansas has a little bit better guard play, especially with Nick Smith kind of starting to pick things up a little bit. So I'll take Arkansas. VCU St. Mary's, I think this is the worst possible matchup St. Mary's could have asked for. I'll take VCU here. The Rams are just so physical. They're tough. They'll pressure you. Great defensive team. And then Ace Baldwin might actually be the best guard on the floor in terms of marchness, if that makes sense, as a guy who can score and kind of play make for others. I love Aiden Mahaney, but he's only a freshman. I think VCU beats St. Mary's here. UConn versus Iona. A lot of people like Iona here simply because Rick Pitino, which, whatever, if you guys want to take them as a meme pick, good for you. UConn's just very clearly a better team. I'll take the Huskies. TCU versus the winner of Arizona State, Nevada. That game doesn't really matter to me because I think TCU beats both of those teams. Even without Eddie Lampkin, I still think Mike Miles, again, one of the better guards in the country. I trust that heading into the tournament. Gonzaga versus Grand Canyon. I will take Gonzaga here. Grand Canyon did an awesome job getting to the NCAA tournament, though, so props to them. But Gonzaga really looks to be hitting their stride. I'll take them. Northwestern Boise State. Not going to pick against my hometown Northwestern Wildcats here. Mountain West, I'm always very skeptical of in the tournament, and so that kind of plays a role here for me. Northwestern, I just think, is a better defensive team, and I think I trust their guards a little bit more. I really like Boo Buie and Chase Audige, so I'll take the Wildcats here. UCLA versus UNC Asheville. Weird game because UNC Asheville's best player is a guy who came from Tennessee, Drew Pember. He averages like 21 points, 11 rebounds, shoots 37% from three. He can cause some issues for them. But UCLA, outside of that, I think is just a way more talented, way more experienced team. And so I'll take the Bruins. Kansas versus Arkansas. Arkansas, I consider to be a really dangerous team if they got the right 1 seed. I don't think Kansas is the right 1 seed here, though. So I'll take Kansas to move on. Kansas, I just think, they're just loaded. I love Jalen Wilson, love Grady Dick, DeJuan Harris. KJ Adams, one of the best passers. So I'll take the Jayhawks here. VCU versus UConn. I will take UConn. Again, UConn's one of the deepest teams in the country. I think they really don't have any holes on their roster. Maybe they lack a true point guard, but I think it's still enough to get by VCU. So I'll take the Huskies. TCU versus Gonzaga. Really like the way Gonzaga has been playing this year. I think they have the offensive firepower, the shooting to kind of just overwhelm TCU, who's one of the worst shooting teams in the country and really not a great offensive team outside of Miles. So I'll take Gonzaga. Northwestern, UCLA. Two teams that can struggle offensively, but when you're looking at it from that perspective, I think UCLA has the better defense, and I think they have the better offensive talent. Jaime Jaquez is a stud. Tiger Campbell's been there forever. David Singleton, I just don't think misses threes ever. And so even without Jalen Clark, I still like UCLA to get by Northwestern. Kansas versus UConn. This is where I will have Kansas bowing out and losing to UConn. UConn, I just think, is an absolutely loaded roster. Jordan Hawkins is one of those guys who I just really like as an NBA prospect thanks to his movement shooting ability. Andre Jackson, one of the best glue guys in the country. Really like his game. One of the best defenders in the country. And then you get Adama Sanogo, Donovan Clingan. Alex Caravan's a really good freshman with size who can shoot it. And I just think Kansas is a little bit overwhelmed physically by this team, especially because they don't really have any experienced big guys on the roster. I know KJ Adams has been great, but he's only 6'7". Only so much you can do against Sanogo and Clingan, who are both pushing. I think Clingan's like 7'1", Sanogo's like 6'10", so that hurts them. And so I'll take UConn here. Gonzaga, UCLA. This is the type of game where I think UCLA just, again, can't keep up with Gonzaga. I know Gonzaga's struggled in the non-con, but that St. Mary's game, the third one in the WCC championship game, that really opened my eyes in terms of Gonzaga just because they were extending their defense. They were really bothering St. Mary's. With their defensive pressure, they would pick up full court, and then offensively, they just didn't miss a beat either. And so I'll take Gonzaga to beat UCLA. Sets up a fun 4-3 matchup in the Elite Eight, UConn-Gonzaga, where I will ultimately take the UConn Huskies. Funny thing about UConn, in January, if you asked me about UConn, I would have said that this team is super overrated, and frankly, they're just not that good of a team, and I think they got off to a hot start, blah, blah, blah. And then, as I was going through every single bracketology update throughout the season, I kept on thinking to myself, like, oh, damn, UConn, that's a tough matchup for this team, or that's a tough matchup for Purdue, that's a tough matchup for Houston, all these teams, right? And then, ultimately, it kind of shifted where I was like, okay, if I think UConn's a dangerous team to all these other teams, why am I not high on UConn? And so, I kind of had an epiphany where, ultimately, my conclusion was UConn's actually a good and dangerous team, and I should be picking them to go far, because every single time I see them matched up against a team I like, I start to worry. I start to sweat a little bit, right? And so that's the epiphany I had with UConn. And so I'll have UConn moving on to the Final Four. And that wraps up the West region. Okay, last region here is the East. And just a warning, I hate this region. I think this region sucks. I don't really like any of these teams. So that bothers me. This was the region that took me the longest to fill out. And so yeah, just with that in mind, here we go. Purdue versus the winner of Texas Southern, Fairleigh Dickinson. I'll take Purdue. Memphis versus Florida Atlantic. They always like doing this where they put two non-power conference at-large teams against each other in the first round. They did it last year with San Francisco and Murray State, even though I think Murray State ended up winning the OVC, but they would have been anyway. Same thing with Memphis and FAU. They both would have been in regardless. I'll take Memphis here. I think their defensive pressure really gets to FAU, and I think they have the best guard on the floor in Kendrick Davis. Duke versus Oral Roberts. This is a game that just sucks because I really like Oral Roberts. Obviously, if you remember in 2021, I had Oral Roberts beating Ohio State. At the same time, you got to know when to dump your stock, right? And now's the time to dump your stock. I love Oral Roberts. I think they have a really good team. They're better than that 2021 team. Duke is just a buzzsaw right now. And so I just think they have the type of team that can totally shut down A. Smith's pick and rolls with Connor Vanover. I think Derek Lively's going to play a huge role in this. And I will have the Blue Devils moving on. Tennessee versus Louisiana. I'm going to take Louisiana here. If you guys have been listening to me for the entire season, you'll know that I do not trust Tennessee. I've never trusted Tennessee since 2019. I just cannot deal with this team anymore. It sucks that the guy Ziegler got hurt. And that obviously contributed to this pick for me. But also, Louisiana's got some high major talent on that team. Jordan Brown was a former 5-star prospect who's like a 6'10 big. And then you also have Greg Williams, who played at St. John's for a few years. I think Tennessee is vulnerable right now, and I know they have a really good defense. I know Uros Plavsic is going to really give them issues in the front court. If you're a betting person, I'm looking at Louisiana money line thinking Tennessee never really performs in the tournament. And Louisiana's got legit talent on that roster. And they like to play high-low a lot too. Like, they got some size, they got athleticism. I got the Raging Cajuns moving on. Kentucky versus Providence in the Bryce Hopkins revenge game. I'm going to take Providence here. I think there's something weird about Providence. I know they looked horrible in the Big East tournament, but there's something weird about Providence where I just kind of think they have some luck behind them. Meanwhile, like the Bryce Hopkins thing, I think Bryce Hopkins might be the best player on the floor in this game. I know Kentucky has Oscar Tshiebwe, but I don't know. I like the Friars here, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Kentucky loses this game. The calls for John Calipari to be fired will be unbelievable. I will never agree with that, but this would be a bad one, especially if you lose to the team that has a guy that wouldn't play for your team last year when you lost to a 15 seed. Anyway, you can go down a whole rabbit hole of this, but I like Providence here. Again, I just think Ed Crosswell's a really good post player. I like Bryce Hopkins. I'll take them. Kansas State, Montana State. Montana State's really good at getting to the free throw line, and Kansas State kind of struggles with fouls. But overall, Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson are a little bit too much. I'll take the Wildcats. Michigan State versus USC. USC is better than people think, but ultimately I think Michigan State, when healthy, is a really good team. You know, they get Malik Hall back, but then you also add like those guards with Tyson Walker, Jaden Akins, and AJ Hoggard. They complement each other so well, and I think that's going to be a really tough trio to beat in the first round, so I'll have the Spartans. Marquette versus Vermont. Of all the 2-15 games, this scares me the most just because Vermont and Marquette play a similar style where they'll shoot a lot of threes. You know, they're offensively oriented. I could see this game kind of becoming a little bit of a shootout, but overall, I think Marquette just has a little bit too much talent for Vermont, even though if I were to pick a 2-15 upset, which, by the way, I'm not doing, this would be the one I'd pick, but I like Marquette to win here. Purdue versus Memphis. This is where I think Purdue just runs into a whole bunch of issues. I'll take Memphis here. It's been well documented that Purdue sucks against full court pressure, and that's pretty much all Memphis does. I think Memphis has the best guard on the floor in Kendrick Davis. I talked about that with the FAU game as well. If I were a Purdue fan and I'm listing all the 8-9s in order of who I would most not want to play, Memphis is number 1, followed by a large gap. Like, this is such a bad matchup for Purdue. I think Memphis is going to speed Purdue up. They're going to limit Edey's touches. As long as they can just avoid foul trouble and avoid turning the ball over, I really think Memphis has this game wrapped. And so I'll take the Tigers to beat Purdue. Duke, Louisiana. I think Duke has too much talent for Louisiana, even though, again, Louisiana has some talent. But like Jeremy Roach, Derek Lively, Kyle Filipowski is obviously a stud. He's like a 15-point-a-game, 7-footer, can stretch the floor. That's just a lot to ask of Louisiana to guard. And so I think Duke beats the Cajuns there. Providence, K-State, two teams that I think are similar in that they're not super impressive in any one area, which makes me think that this is a closer game than people would maybe expect. So I think I'm going to take Providence to beat K-State here. I love K-State. I love Jerome Tang. I think that program's going to be awesome. I just think they don't really do any one thing well where I'm like, oh, okay, this is their clear advantage over Providence. And so whenever I get an 11/3 where both teams kind of tend to not do anything great, it kind of leads me to think like, oh, okay, might as well just take the upset here. And so I'll take Providence to beat Kansas State. Michigan State, Marquette. This is a game I went back and forth on a lot, but ultimately Marquette defending the way it did in the Big East championship game against Xavier kind of put me over the top with them. Obviously, their offense is great with Tyler Kolek, one of the best passers in the country. You have Cam Jones, really good volume, off-ball scoring guard. Oso Ighodaro is one of the best passing 5-men. This offense is really good, and their defense is decent enough where I think they can get key stops and turn Michigan State over. I'll take the Golden Eagles. Memphis and Duke. I really like Memphis. This might be recency bias, but I really just think they're a nightmare to play against. And Duke, for as talented as they are, for as well as they've been playing, they're still a bunch of freshmen, really, outside of Jeremy Roach, right? And I think Memphis kind of has the physicality and just kind of the veterans to really kind of mess with Duke. And so I'll take the Memphis Tigers to the Elite Eight, where they will take on the Marquette Golden Eagles. Again, it's a similar matchup to that Texas-Iowa State game where it's like these teams have played each other a bunch. I think they've played each other twice this year, Marquette and Providence. And it's either the favorite blows Providence out or Providence wins. I think Marquette blows Providence out, even though they split the regular season series. Marquette, I just think, is too talented offensively. And then you get Memphis-Marquette in the Elite Eight, where I will take the Marquette Golden Eagles to the Final Four. Again, I just really buy their offense. This will be a really fun game because both teams love to pressure the ball and press full court. And I think Marquette has a little bit more offensive composure than Memphis that would lead them to a victory here and get them to the Final Four. So now we got the Final Four. We got Alabama versus Marquette and Houston versus UConn. Alabama versus Marquette. Alabama, I just think, is way too talented, way too deep. I think their size would really become an issue for Marquette to deal with. I think Charles Bediako would be the key here, especially if Oso Ighodaro gets into foul trouble. Alabama is just so deep. They shoot a bunch of threes. They play fast. They play the perfect style of basketball where they can increase their margin of error. So they don't really need to be super efficient offensively because of how many shots they get up. Marquette will play into that a little bit. And so I think ultimately when you're comparing styles, they play similarly. So who does that better? Alabama, you're not going to find a better team at that in the country. So I'll have Alabama beating Marquette. Houston versus UConn. This game would be the total opposite of the other Final Four games, so that would be a fun contrast of styles. I think Houston is a little bit better than UConn, even though this game would be very close, so I'll have them. Houston versus Alabama for the championship. I know kind of a boring national championship game, but listen, Alabama, I think, is the best team in the country. I just think Houston, there's something about Houston this year. The Final Four is in Houston. Jim Nantz is a Houston alum. It's his last Final Four. Houston's never won a national championship. This is the year for Houston to win it. If they can't win it this year, I don't know if they'll ever win it. I think Alabama's a really, really, really good team. They played each other, obviously, earlier in the season. Houston dominated that game for like 35 minutes, but then Alabama had one really good stretch where they just totally wiped out Houston and ultimately ended up winning. But this is the year I think Houston gets it done and wins the national championship. And yeah, so that is my official 2023 NCAA Tournament bracket. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for a great year. It's been really fun doing these videos. And enjoy the madness. Make sure in the comments, though, tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me your Final Four. Tell me your national champion. Tell me your major upsets. I want to hear all of them. So please, in the comments, let me know. And again, thank you guys so much. It's been an awesome year. And I guess, go Cougs.